So volume 3 starts with the commodity as already explicitly a capitalist commodity. Now the contradiction begins to work out in how surplus value becomes profit. Up to this point, and you will have noticed when I was talking about volume 2 and the movement of surplus value and its movement from production to circulation, I kind of flipped between surplus value and profit, because that's what Marx does. He assumes a simple identity between surplus value and profit in volume 2. And for the purposes of volume 2, that's good enough. But at the beginning of volume 3, he says we need to differentiate between these two, because the production of surplus value is distinct from its realization. And in particular, he needs to do this because he's got to explain the difference between the rate of surplus value and the rate of profit. Now, the rate of surplus value, as we've already mentioned, indicates the degree of exploitation of labor by capital. Marx typically uses 100%, so half the day is equivalent to the wage and half the day is surplus labor, surplus value. Now, also, Marx typically has 20% for the rate of profit, okay? The rate of profit indicates capital's relation with itself, its degree of expansion. So in other words, if capital has a 5% rate of profit, this is the rate in which it will expand. If it has a 50% rate of profit, it's going to expand much more quickly, right? What is the relationship between these two key indicators? Well, the relationship is that profit arises from and is the result of the exploitation of labor, but doesn't directly reveal it. So if the rate of surplus value was doubled, so all other things being equal, the rate of profit would double. But in looking at the rate of profit as such, it looks like it's capital's relation with itself. It's capital which is expanding. There is on the surface, looking at the rate of profit, no indication of what the rate of surplus value might be. You can't proceed, Marx says quite rightly, from the rate of profit to the rate of surplus value. You have to proceed in the other direction to reconstruct it. So what we have with this is a notion again of essence and appearance. So we're reconstructing how the essence appears, how surplus value becomes profit. What is their relation is exactly what Marx begins to investigate. I'm going to give you a broad outline of what his answer is, and then we might go through it in a bit more detail step by step. The relationship involves time. The rate of surplus value, S over V, is about socially necessary labor time and surplus labor time, both carried out in the same period. The rate of profit is by convention actually the annual rate of profit. It's the amount that capital expands in the course of a year. So when we say rate of profit is 20%, what we're actually saying is 20% increase during the year. So we have the annual rate of profit. Now the annual rate of profit is first cut surplus value over the capital employed in its production. Okay, so that's S over C plus V, constant plus variable capital. Surplus value over constant plus variable capital. Now, Marx breaks this down into two components. If you're used to algebra, this is a simple, simple operation. You divide both the numerator and the denominator by V. So S over C plus V is equivalent to saying S over V times V over C plus V. Okay. Now, if you're not used to the algebra, what he's saying is it's the equivalent to the rate of surplus value times the proportion of the variable capital over the total capital. Okay. So Marx brings in the organic composition of capital. And what he does is he substitutes on the second element of this little equation, the organic composition of capital. It's probably easier if I put in some examples, but the consequence of this relation is that the rate of profit varies in proportion to the rate of surplus value. When the rate of surplus value goes up, the rate of profit will go up, but inversely with the organic composition of capital. As the organic composition goes up, so the rate of profit will go down. Okay, this may be a counterintuitive result, but it is the result that Marx posits as if like his first cut. So you take our examples again from Marx. We have rate of surplus value 100%. We have an organic composition of capital of 4. Then the rate of profit will be 100 times 1 over 1 plus 4, which is 1 over 5, which is 20%. So that's how we get from our 100% to our 20%. Slight pause there. Oh, by the way, I'm experimenting with different forms of animation, as my students are just discovering. All right, volume 3, chapter 1 is where he steps through this argument in more detail. Okay, and what he does is he compares two different ways of presenting commodity value. Up to now, he's tended to represent the value of a commodity product as C plus V plus S. Are by now quite familiar, I hope, 80, C20, V20S, okay? That means a total value of 120. Now, what he now points out is we can express this in two different ways. There's either, and this is purely formal in one sense, right? He's just putting brackets in different places, right? It's like it's slightly formal exercise, okay? So it can either be C plus and then V plus S, which would be the value conserved, which is the constant capital, plus the new value, 40. And this is, if you like, the most essential relation. This is the foundational relation. But it can also be represented as, on the left-hand side, C plus V, and then plus S. And this is the relation as it appears to capital, which is cost price plus surplus value. So capital is paid out for their constant capital, they're paid out for variable capital, that's their cost, and then plus S is the surplus value. Now, what Marx points out is that this apparently purely formal relation expresses a real difference between the internal and the external, okay? So if we think of cost price, he uses the letter K to represent cost, C plus V. And so then the value is also expressed as cost plus surplus value. But again, this isn't quite how capitalist sees it, because once the surplus value is realized, it's profit. So in the end, he comes up with the value of the commodity is cost price plus profit, K plus P. So what he's doing is he's reworking volume 1 in order to reconstruct how the internal production of value and surplus value actually appears. I mean, I don't mean it appears as a mirage, but really does appear in terms of capitalist mode of production. In chapter 2 of volume 3, Marx reconsiders value form. Remember, I talked about value form volume 1, exchange value as the value form of value. Marx returns to it, and he looks at the value form of profit. And he says that profit is the form of appearance of surplus value. Surplus value is the essence of profit, and profit is the necessary form of appearance of surplus value. Now, profit does not appear as particularly arising from living labor, nor even labor power, but it appears to the capitalist, and it appears on the surface, if you like, in an undifferentiated way. This is the so-called marginal productivity of bourgeois economics, that it springs from all the elements of the capitalist production process that are brought together by the entrepreneurial genius, or the genius of capital, who we will call the entrepreneur. So it looks as though profit springs in an undifferentiated way from all elements of the capital invested. Also, as far as the capitalist is concerned, profit is an addition to cost. So the cost is the blue, the profit is the sort of pink, I guess. the right hand side, the pink is the value of the commodity as seen by the capitalist. Okay, so they just see that they're able to sell their commodity at a higher amount than what they paid for it. The difference is the addition to the cost. So I've kind of rehearsed this already. Just going to go into a little bit more detail. That Marx identifies the rate of profit around, in the end, 3 variables. Okay, the first of those variables is the rate of surplus value, okay, which we've already identified. And the second of those variables is this relation between the variable capital and the total capital advanced. Okay. There's one other